Good morning, everyone, formally. All right, today we're going to talk about carving a little bit. It's been my privilege in the last few years, as I think I mentioned before, that I've done a few classes at Palomar. Not all that many, but one of them was I was invited by Ken Manassian, who's an instrument maker and teacher, and teaches the carving class or did teach the carving class at Palomar. Invited me to come and take the class, and I enjoyed it so much that I became the TA in the class and spent my last few years TAing in that class. Unfortunately, at the moment, I'm not going to be involved in the instruction, and I'm not even sure that they have a carving class, because unfortunately they have to do everything remotely now as well. So, but that'll come back in the future. However, when we started the class, we were partway through the class. So I've got some stuff that I was using for demo to the students, and so I'm going to show you a couple of aspects of carving. But basically, carving can be done with any number of, let's call them instruments, any number of tools, from a chainsaw to an adze to very fine carving tools. Whatever removes the wood that you need to remove to create what you leave behind is a carving tool. So I started out with this sort of purist notion that I had to use a really sharp blade for everything, and you know, I've also seen people carve bears out of tree trunks, and you know, they use a chainsaw, literally use a chainsaw, and that was pretty interesting as well. But the carving I got introduced to through this class was a combination of the kind of carving that you put onto furniture, for example, shelves. This is one of the projects you do in the first class. There's a nice little shell. And these are often applied to furniture. This is just one example of many different things you can do. But you can take something like this and apply it to a drawer front, or use it creatively on a piece of furniture. And many of the carvings that you see on furniture are applied rather than carved from a single block. But anyway, well, that's one of the things that you learn to do in the class. And then you also learn to do what are known as low relief and high relief carvings. So as you move on to the intermediate class, you get into low relief carvings. The best example I can think of, and that I've ever heard of a low relief carving that everybody can relate to is a coin. If you look at a coin from straight on, you can see exactly what it's trying to depict with no question whatsoever. If you look at it side on, you have absolutely no idea. So if you look at this piece of wood side on, you've got no idea what's on it. But if you look at it heads up, that's a low relief carving, and it's a coin. And this is something I'm going to show you in a moment, the drawing that we used to lay it out. But this is not a personal creation of mine. This is taken straight from a book with instructions, and I'll point those books out for you. But it's a fun little thing to do. And, you know, say you were making kitchen cabinets and you carved a couple of kois into your panels, I think that would make your kitchen really interesting. And when I have fun with the little defects that you find in the wood as well. But so when you do the low relief carving, you then move on to a high relief carving of exactly the same fish. I haven't got a complete one with me, but I'll be doing my demo on the high relief that we were going to use in the class. And then as you move on to the advanced class, and this was the part that really became fun for me, because it happened that Ken is a really, really good carver and a brilliant woodworker and a fantastic instrument maker, but he'd never actually got around to carving the advanced class project. Which is in the round, as it were. And this is the project. Each semester I would make one of these and demo making it. As you can see, it's carved on every surface that it is. So it's designed to be looked at from any which way. And those are, that's the, once you do that, and again, there's a plan for it, so it doesn't have to be, you know, you don't just start carving away. Sorry.
I got people in the...
Oh, you got in the waiting list? Okay, we're gonna just let some people in and then I'll continue.
I can't see it from this.
Oh my gosh, the list is getting longer. Do you want to just take it?
Okay, I'm going to mute him. Mute him. Okay, there you go.
All right. Okay, so we've got a bunch more people in, and welcome. I've already started, so I'm going to continue, but I was just talking about the different kinds of carvings that are taught at Palomar College. So anyway, what happened was that usually people did this by independent study, and they had a lot of difficulty visualizing it. So we ended up with such a big class one semester that we moved to another room entirely, and I was basically there supervising the advanced class of students, and I wasn't a teacher. So I decided that the best way to learn is to make a turtle, and that's what I did. And I found that it was a great help to the students because they could actually see how, for example, you create these curves, create the I've forgotten the name of these items, but you know, how you create the feet and how you create the general shape of the thing, how you do the belly and so on. People found it very, very helpful to actually see it demoed, and it was my observation that the quality of the work went up. So I've had a lot of fun doing that, but I'm not able to do it at the moment. So you guys have to.
Hey, Paul?
Yes.
You may have actually brought that turtle up and showed it to people before the rest of us got on. But if that was an example of your carving, can you show it to us again? And just, I mean, that was amazing.
Oh, thank you. Yes, absolutely. So it's a 3D carving of a hawksbill turtle. I can't remember the taxonomic name for it right off the top of my head, but it's a 3D carving that the school project is just to do the carving. I also teach how to do the finish as well, because that's just something I started playing with stains and shellac and stuff. And this was actually the half-scale model. The full-scale model, I got lucky. I got a prize in the fair with the full-scale.
That was a beautiful piece.
With good reason, yeah, fantastic.
And he was also featured in Fine Woodworking magazine for that article too.
Fantastic, wow.
Oh, thank you. Well, anyway, but you can learn. You can do the same thing. I've seen many better, even, you know, because everybody can learn this stuff. It's not just a matter of having talent. I did, to be honest, 10 years ago, I thought I had no creative talent whatsoever, and started woodworking and having to draw things out, and realized that I could draw a curve and stuff like that. And anyway, it's kind of progressed from there. So that's been pretty cool. So what I'm going to do now, do we have any other questions at this point? I'm going to go over some of the tools that you need. You want to let some more people in?
Yeah.
Oh, this is great.
How do I get them in?
Patience, please, folks.
Okay, there you go.
Okay, so I'm going to go over a little bit of whatever you're doing carving-wise, something of the tools that we need, and in terms of benches and equipment, and I'll talk a little bit about sharpening. You know, I can't fail to talk about sharpening in some way or another, and then I'm going to do a little demo of the high profile, the high relief fish, of how you actually cut it out, and a little bit about how you start the curves and so on. So I'm going to start with talking about, very briefly, the more common types of carving carving gouges, the ones that we use for fine work anyway, which are, just to give you an idea, all right, so this is a fairly solid little gouge, carving gouge. It's not very big, very, very sharp. These are among the finest brand in the world, the Swiss made, a bit like Swiss watches. They're just the best, or at least like Swiss watches were. And they're really good for carving. However, they have a very hard beechwood handle that will take a little bit of hammering, but not much. If you're going to do heavy work in, say, construction work, or say you were a medieval craftsman carving a large piece in a church or something like that, you'd use a heavy-duty gouge like this, which is much thicker in the blade, so it can take a lot more pounding, and it actually has a wooden handle with this has a leather ring around it. Sometimes you'll get other products on, but it's specifically designed to be hammered on. Whereas most of what I use are, I really don't like using a mallet if I can avoid it, because once you get more than very, very slight taps, you tend to lose control with a mallet. So you've got to always think where your blade's going to go. But anyway, the common shapes of blades, most carving, if you think about it, is either doing a concave or a convex curve. Sometimes you've got some flat surfaces, but that's what most carving is convex and concave. So the tools that we deal with that are, first of all, the general gouges, ones like this, for example. Usually part of the profile, part of this profile is a section of a circle. So when you cut the bottom of your trench there, it's actually a section of a circle. And you buy your gouges in different sections of the circle, which gives you different gouges. For example, where's my number 2?
Hey, Paul?
Yes.
There will be differences, I'm sure, between gouges used in turning and gouges used in carving. Like, for instance, one you'd be able to tap on the back and the other is much larger to be able to control. But in terms of the shapes of the blades, is there a lot of commonality between the gouges you'd buy for turning and the gouges you'd buy for carving?
The commonality is that they have an edge. That's about it. They're a completely different design. If I were to put this, try and use it on a car, on a lathe, sorry, I would damage the blade. I'd be lucky if I didn't damage myself. It's too short. Turning tools tend to be longer so that your body mass can counteract the forces that are dealing with turning. I've not done much turning myself, so, but yes, these are...
Is the grind angle different too?
Yes, I believe it usually is, yeah. And with turning tools, you do have to create a sharp edge, but you have to create it in such a way that that edge is really heavily supported by steel. Whereas some of these are at a very shallow angle, some of these blades.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so when I get my camera back, there we go. You can see the bottom part of this is a section of a circle, and the bottom part of this one is also a section of a circle. This is a much, much bigger circle. So carving blades, carving gouges are numbered from, the curved ones are numbered from number 2 upwards, up to 11 and 12 are not curved gouges.
Does the numbers have any meaning in terms of diameter? Of the...
Yes, they're very specific to the diameter. I'm not dialed into
it's not like a radius or anything like that. Just a number that identifies it.
Yes. You don't think I want a blade with a 15-inch radius. You just go, I want a number 7.
Okay.
So And to muddy the waters a little more, there's a European sizing and there's a British size. And the British sizing is slightly different. Basically, the British things are going to be one number higher in the curves. The flat gouge, just the basic chisel-shaped gouge, is always the number one. But then with the European system, you go to one with a skew blade, and it's a 1S. In England, it would be a number 2. And then everything gets bumped up a number from there. So that's the numbering system. I do actually organize my tool roll, and we'll show you that in a bit, in such a way that it goes from number 1 through 12, because it's easy to refer to.
But Paul, what is the default in the United States?
Sorry?
What is the default schema used here, British or European?
If it's a British tool, it's the British system. If it's a European tool, it's the European system.
They use interchangeably, or most people use one or the other?
Usually, yes.
Usually use what?
Well, most of the people that I know that are serious carvers use the European method because they own Swiss-made blades.
Oh.
The best ones, I won't say the best in the world because somebody will come up with a better one, but these are really, really, if you buy one of these, you should never need to replace it. They're really high quality tools. They're not particularly cheap. And
Are those file chisels? The manufacturer file?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Swiss-made is file. But they tend to put Swiss-made on the actual gouges. But yes, it's PFEI or IEL. Yeah. So they really are good tools. There are a few other makes that are quality tools, and there are a lot of makes that have that, you know, of those heavier gouges. You know, this for example is I think it's German or Dutch. And then this one is really bizarre because it's a Buck Brothers blade with a Swedish handle. So, and I'm not sure to what numbers these go to. Some of these older ones don't even have numbers on them. So you basically, as a carver, you reach out for what's going to fit the curve. So for example, going back to my friend the turtle, when I cut these, we'll call them scales, they're not, there's platelets, there is a name for it, I can't remember it. It just so happens that the number 2 fits really well to that curve. So in creating that curve and then in creating these bits here, I use the number 2. Oh, you can't see because my fist was in the way. But if I'm creating this edge here, I use the number 2 going in to create it. So you use all these curves for the different curves that you need. That makes sense? All right, so we do have these curved blades, and they are sections of a circle. There's one other kind of curved blade. Here's a nice good-sized one. That's known as a veiner. The reason it's known as a veiner is because it was commonly used to create the veins in leaves, in carving, in traditionally. But the veiner is this shape. It's basically one flat blade that has been bent like this. So it's one continuous blade from here through here, which presents some challenges. As you can imagine, there you go. That's it. It's straight at the edge and then has been bent over. There you go. You can see it nicely there. And so that's a pretty big one. Normally a veiner is pretty small, but so that's also one of the standard basics. And then you have the V tool, which is, you use that a lot for defining lines, and you can turn your tool to either one side or the other, which gives you a lot of flexibility in creating straight edges or bevels, and you can create a really, really super fine line with this little edge corner there. So this is, talk about challenging for sharpening. This is 3 blades, basically. You have 2 chisel blades, and then a little tiny, tiny curved blade on the end. But it's so tiny a curve that it'll give you a really nice, clean line. And I remember Ken saying, if you mess your V-tool up, throw it away. Don't even try to fix it. I have to confess, I've got one that I've been meaning to give. Well, when I fix it finally, I'll give it to Doug. But I've got one that's been sitting in my shop. Every now and again, I pull it out and try to straighten it up and get it to work. And I just can't get it right. When I get it right, you get it, Doug. But
with turning tools, you really need to sharpen them on a regular basis because of the beating they take. When you're doing hand carving, do you need to constantly go back and sharpen your edges, or do you have a much longer period of time between when you use it first and when you need to sharpen it?
Okay, you're leading me on to the next part of my presentation.
Oh, I'm happy to wait, Paul. I didn't mean to jump ahead. So just hold that thought. Hold that thought.
We're pretty close anyway. And then there's a couple of other variations. There's a tool, I forget what it's called, but you can buy it. It actually makes a sort of box-shaped groove. And then there are all sorts of variations on the shape along the length of the blade. For example, this is what I use for spoon making a lot, because it cuts nicely down into the wood. And I can cut down into a concave surface there. So you get variations, and then there are, of course,
What is that tool called?
that is called a spoon gauge, I think, spoon gouge, I think. It's a curved, where is it? It's a curved number 7, which means it's exactly the same curve as this number 7, but it's, oh, I see, it's doing it opposite. But they are both pretty much the same curve. They are the same curve. And so you get variations in that. You get blades turned around. There are any number of variations. When we start people in the carving class, it's 6 instruments. 6. You can start off there about $200 for the set, and it's just 6 pieces. And you can do a heck of a lot with that. Just like all other woodworking, if you want to buy all the tools and do all the stuff, you can do it. But it's not necessary to be creative. If you're carving, it's more, for me anyway, it's more about focusing on the carving than it is on the tool. So I'll buy a tool if I think it's going to really help with the carving, and I'll often buy that tool and find that actually I've got something that works just as well, but then I have the tool and I've satisfied my need to have a tool.
Hey, Paul, not to jump the gun again, but if you don't mention the 6 tools in your talk, what you'd have people start off with, it would be really nice for us who might be just starting with carving to know what your 6 tools are that you recommend in the class. So
let me put that up on the forum.
That'd be great. Excellent. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, but basically there are a couple of curved tools, a chisel with 2 bevels on it, a veiner, and a V-tool. So pretty basic set of tools, and they will get you going. Also, you can use almost anything. I mean, I've seen work carved by people who are using homemade carving tools that is just incredible. But to be honest, we now segue into my next section about sharpening and keeping things sharp. If your tools for carving are not sharp, then you're up the creek. I didn't appreciate what a sharp tool was until I took the carving class, and I realized that even on a soft wood like basswood, 15 or 20 cuts takes a little edge off of the blade, which means that you begin to get things like grain popping up and not such a clean cut happening. You know, sometimes when you use a gouge, you leave a lovely shiny surface, and then it starts getting a little rough. And at that point, you know that it needs a little attention. But I don't sharpen my tools much. What I do is I hone them. So you can see this is well used. You see, some of you have seen it before. I did just make a new one that's hanging on my bench, but it's just two pieces of leather glued onto a piece of walnut with hide glue. And then I use, generally speaking, carvers find that the green stuff, the chromium oxide compound is really good, but I use this to keep the tools sharp. The only time I actually have to do any sharpening on a stone is sometimes, you know, you'll use it a lot and you need to resharpen it, but most of the time it's because because I've dropped it or I've run it into something that, you know, I ran it over through the wood into something metal behind, like a holdfast or whatever. So, but this is like my most useful carving tool, because this is what keeps the tools. And even something like the V tool, I can do that and do that and then do that, and that sharpens up the edge. So I'll have to pay some attention to the back every now and again, but a piece of leather cut in the V shape can be really helpful with that. But generally speaking, when you're honing a blade like this, you're not creating much of a pencil file there. So you can get away with just honing the front edge of the bevel.
Paul, was the chromium side providing the grit on the leather? Is that what it's doing?
It provides the abrasive.
Right. Yeah, okay, good.
Yeah. And as you know, basically, sanding, abrasion is, you know, creating a polish is about creating increasingly small scratch patterns. So this may be a shiny blade, but if I look at it with a microscope, it's still a bunch of scratches. So we're just creating a finer and finer scratch pattern on the blade, which is why it comes up with such a beautiful polish when it gets sharp. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Paul, excuse me, what weight leather do you use for your honing strop?
I use the heavy stuff, usually by scraps. I used to buy it at Tandy Leather, but they've gotten very expensive. The last piece of leather I got was belly leather. You know, I got a large piece of it for about $20. But just any heavy duty leather. I've even, leather's getting very expensive, and I've even thought of Harbor Freight sell what they call split leather apron. And I've even thought of buying a new one of those and carving it up. But I don't use any particular grade. I'm finding that the chromium, the compounds tends to stick to the rough side. If you have a smooth side and a rough side, I find the compound tends to stay in the rough side a little easier. But really, it's the compound that gives you the polish, because it's still an abrasive thing, even though it's creating a polish. So that kind of doesn't really answer your question, but just anything heavy. I wouldn't use suede or anything like that. The last piece I bought was nearly 1/4 inch thick, and that's a bit too thick. It's a bit spongy. You know. All right. Any other questions? Okay. So how are we doing on time? It's about, what I think I want to do is to turn this around. There we are. So I'm going to cut me out of the picture a bit, and I'm going to show you a basic set. Well, this is a bit more than a basic set of tools. But we start, and this is one of the 6, if you guys feel you want to write it down, or you start with, this is basically a chisel, the number 1, with a bevel on both sides. You guys see that? So that you use a lot for, if you don't have a number 2, you can use it for creating curves. You can use it for a lot of different things. It is, in essence, just a chisel that's got 2 bevels. And then you have what in Europe would be the number 2, and what, I mean, in England would be number 2, and this with the Swiss made, trying to get the best picture for you guys. But there you can see it is skewed. So this is a number 1S, really, really useful for getting into little corners. You know, where there's a little fuzzy piece of wood just sticking out, and you can get right in that corner, you know, say it's got 3 sides to it, and get right in with that little tip. You can also get into corners using a knife, which is a common carving tool as well. A lot of American carvers just use a little knife like this. So that's the number 1. And then I've shown you a number 2. I don't have them all in the same sizes. This is a number 3. It's a little bit more of a curve. Not much, but a little bit. Yes.
When you say 2 and 3, you're showing us examples of curvature and width. Is a 2 always that wide and a 3 always that narrow, or do they come in different widths? Is the number describing the curvature or both, width and curvature?
Great question. Really good question, and I had completely skated over that. No, your number 2 refers to the curvature, right? Such as this guy. Now, for some reason, there's a window popped up, so I can't see most of the screen. So that's the number 2 curvature. But this is a number 222. So what it refers to, the 22 refers to the metric width from one side of the blade to the other. So this is 22 millimeters from this side of the blade to this side of the blade. And some of the older ones weren't marked with the diameter, but this, you can see when you buy Swiss made tools, you can see that it says this is a number 5, so the curvature of the blade is a number 5, and it's 20 millimeters wide. You see, it's gone all black from use, but it's 20 millimeters wide. So if I say to someone else who knows carving tools, I need to buy a 520, they know what I'm talking about. It's a number 5 blade at 20 millimeters wide.
Perfect.
And they go up to enormous widths. You know, I've got one that's about 40 millimeters wide. Does that clarify things a little bit?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Good. Great. So I'm not going to take you through all the curves and all the different shapes. Here's another spoon gauge in a smaller size. This is a number 8A because the A refers to the shape of the blade of the there's a window in there that's come up. And anyway, it's an 810, so it's 10 inches. Do you want to put it up for a minute? Excuse us, we've got a technical issue here.
Okay.
And you appear to have a surgeon working on it.
Absolutely, yeah. He's probably got a sharp knife as well. We may have to work with this window. But anyway, so this is an 8A10. Oh, great, super. So you have this curvature here, and the 8 is the curvature of the blade, and then the 10 is the millimeter dimension from one side to the other. So this is really nice for, you know, say you wanted to carve a perfect hemisphere into a piece of wood, this would be a really good tool for doing it. I find it's not so good for spoons, but it's definitely got its uses and hard to replace if you need to use one.
Maybe a ladle. Ladle.
Yeah, it does look like a ladle, doesn't it? I mean, ladles won't usually cut you. So I've got to emphasize again, sharpness. This is where I learned about sharp blades, was in carving. You will notice as you carve, very, very quickly, your blade will become not dull at all. It's still pretty sharp, but if you hone it, you'll be astonished at the difference. I don't know if there's too much else I want to say about the tools. I do want to refer to the knife, and one aspect of carving that chip carving that I haven't got into that much, they use little knives. This is not really a chip carving knife. This is more for like spoon carving and so on, but they use small little knives and they cut out in chips or in patterns, and that's a whole movement of carving, if you like, a whole set of carving. There are also a lot of people that carve with their hands. And if you're going to play at this, I beg you, get yourself a Kevlar glove. I cut spoons with this, and believe me, when that blade cuts into your finger, if you're not wearing a Kevlar glove, it's messy. It's you know, you get the red stuff all over the place. So you really want to use a Kevlar glove, especially if you're starting out. You shouldn't ever be in a situation where the blade goes through and touches the Kevlar, but it's pretty good stuff. If you spike yourself, it's going to go straight through. You know, if you stab someone wearing a Kevlar vest, you'll probably get through the fibers. But you know, in terms of a blade touching it, it gives you a huge cushion against personal damage. And you get used to working with a glove. It has a nice grip. There's a number of different gloves available. These I bought at TH&H. They're great anytime you're worried about cutting yourself.
You said there was a style of carving called chip carving. What is the style called? What kind of carving?
What kind of carving is chip carving?
No, you said there is a style called chip carving, and then there's something you do. Is there a name to your kind of carving?
I don't know, really. I don't know. It's just I guess general carving. I really don't know. I haven't got an answer for you on that.
That's fine. Thank you.
Yeah, you know, it's a subsidiary, I guess, chip carving. And I got to show you guys something in the latest fine woodworkers. You ask about chip carving. There's a fascinating article. If you want to talk about taking chip carving to another level, this lady really does it. It's in fine woodworking, and she just does the most amazing work. And I think a lot of it's done with knives. So this woman is very, very creative and very, very you know, she spent her lifetime carving, but that's I think an example of where you can take chip carving. I don't know much about it because I've never really done it. All right, so I'm going to talk. How are we doing on time?
We got about 20 minutes.
Okay, great. Well, that'll give us plenty of time for questions. I wanted to show you a couple of sharpening tools, and then I want to show you the book from which, or the books from which some of these projects are done, and then do a quick demo. So when I first started carving, these curved blades are a challenge, especially if you get something old like this that's beat up and you want to get it back into sharp condition. It is a diamond blade with both concave and concave surfaces, in a diamond sharpening tool rather, with concave and convex surfaces, so you can get because these are sections of a circle, you can get your piece into the right spot and then start getting a curve. That was what I started with. I've sort of progressed beyond that, but it at least, if you're trying to create a curve on a flat stone, you're probably going to increase the curve. increase your off true, as it were. So this is one way to attack it. I also use 600 and 1200 diamond sharpener, but very, very rarely, not even for touch up. This is again getting back to tools that are really beat up. I use the ceramic stone a lot, and the reason I'm so hot on ceramic stones is again because of carving, because I've discovered that with an 8,000 stone, you take a curved blade and you try to polish it, and it creates a dent in the surface, whereas you don't get that dent in the surface of a ceramic stone. So, and I actually use it for chisels a lot as well. So, but that's and then another traditional tool for sharpening carving tools is the Arkansas stone. This is natural stone that presumably comes from Arkansas and gets cut into different shapes. And I bought a couple of these with my initial carving set. And they're particularly useful for something like, you remember that V tool that I mentioned? It's hard to get the back of, but with this, I can just take it, run that along the back, and any pencil file there will come off. So that's another way to attack the back of the blade in something like the V tool, which is, you can't get in there with a regular stone. And then there's another favorite of mine, the ceramic slipstones. These are much similar to the Arkansas stones, but they're again different shapes, and they are at about, I'm not sure the grip on these, but they're good enough for sharpening up a lot of different blades and, with different shapes. So again, on the sharpening. Before I move into the demo, I just want to show you that, for example, that turtle is not exactly an original creation of mine. You can see where I got it from. And the nice thing about carving something from a book is it really helps to improve your skills without having to be the Michelangelo that sees the piece in the stone. And, you can actually, this book has a plan that you can lay out. It's a half-size plan that you can, double it up on a photocopier. And you basically have the shape of your turtle set out there and what you want to do with it. You have a side view. And then you have a picture of the templates that you need in order to create the shape of the back. So this writer doesn't leave a lot to chance, except, obviously you have to develop the skills, but you can buy books like this, Carving Nature, got some really, really good stuff in it. And
I was just trying to figure out how to convert that to a CNC file.
Here, here.
Did you hear that?
Yes.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what. When you show me this, I'm going to have to buy you a beer or something made on a CNC. Oh, but no, why not? Why not? But a couple of other creatures that they have to carve. And then we're going to go on to the fish. This guy, Chris Pye, is really, really knowledgeable. He's written a lot of books. We have quite a few of them in our library here, including this one. This is the one to get if you don't want to buy them all, because he was asked to condense all his books into one. And this is pretty much the masterclass in carving. And you'll be a lot more skilled carver. But again, the fish is not an original work. And the book refers to low relief and high relief, which is nice because some people have a little difficulty with that. And then you get a map. So again, a drawing that you can do, that you can copy, and I'll show you that in a moment. And then a set of instructions with photographs. So whenever I do something like this, I study the photographs really, really carefully, because usually you can't see everything in one photo, but if you're looking for stuff, if you look through all the photos, you can find what you want and how the right angle to see it that you need, that you can cut. So 10-minute demo, good, then I won't bore you with more than 10 minutes.
Hey, Paul.
Yes, well, I get a couple carving tools, I can answer questions.
It was brought up in the chat that people are curious about the hold down. Maybe you're going to be able to show us that as you do your demo. But the question from Paul reads, are you going to discuss clamp and hold down and other means of holding workpieces?
That's up next.
Great.
Yes, absolutely. I'm just looking for my number 2. There it is. Oh, that's number 5.
Well, my number 2 is my wife. Is that what you're looking for?
She's my number 1.
Ooh,
there.
man.
She really is as well.
Happy wife, happy life.
You got it. Although I think she might be glad to see the back of me for a few hours now. So, okay, holding things down. I'm going to have to move my tools out of the way here. So there's a couple of things that are really useful to a carver. One is this bench, which you guys have seen before, or something like it. It's got one edge that sticks out, and it has threads in here set into the wood so that I can bolt down a carving. It's not actually bolted down. I'm going to take it off in a moment. But what this guy does is it enables me to carve in the round. As you can see, there's a partially carved duck there. Here's the head. You carve them and then glue them together. Obviously, I'll take that off. But anyway, it is able to give you the ability to carve from almost any angle that you want. And then lock it in, set it at the angle and lock it in place. So I can really set it to where I can use my body in the most efficient way to carve it out. And you will find, as if you work, that your body has certain curves in its movement that really lend themselves to carving and to woodwork generally. You know, so if I were working on something like this, I might be working the shape of it using my hips as well, if it were a particularly hard. We're using basswood here, which is commonly used for carving because it's really quite soft, but it finishes up really nicely. This is the turtle is basswood, and you saw the underbelly of that is quite glossy. And there's all sorts of techniques to bring that up. So I'm going to move this out of the way just so it's not in the way. But there are variations on this. Veritas make a really nice one, carving vise. This is an oldie. You know, I'm cheap. I get things in garage sales, and sure enough, this was one of those $5 garage sale finds. And it's got another piece to it that you can clamp a long section of wood into. But anyway, I use this a lot when I'm carving in the round. And with things like the turtle, I will, the piece of wood that you cut it out from is just the right shape to hot glue the turtle onto that and then use that as a platform on this. So it enables you to work in 3D really easily without having to move around too much. So I'll just move this to one side. Okay, so are we able to get a little closer?
Should we move the whole bench?
All right, so then if I'm carving something, all right, we won't make the demo for very long. We're just trying to get our camera angles here. We're not NBC and we don't pretend to be.
Okay, I think that's reasonable.
All right, so yeah, So any way we can get a more elevated angle, the view from up top, even if it's distorted, would be. All right, okay, so sorry to make you do this. You draw your fish out. Basically, I made a photocopy of the fish's pattern and then used carbon paper to copy it out onto the fish. And then you take away the background. So this is how you create your high relief. So this was a single piece of wood that I just worked away at, removing.
You took all that away with just that tool?
Well, you see these dots here?
Mm-hmm.
That's the pattern that a Forstner tool makes.
Ah,
So what I do in something like this is I use a Forstner bit, and to get me down there, I'll set it a little higher than the depth I want to get, and then I'll finish up the background here by bringing it down to where I lose these dots, and then I know that everything is at the same. You see these little dots? Then everything is at the same height. But you can also do things like put a ruler across the top of what's left and check your depths like that. You put a mark around the wood before you start. So you have a number of ways of setting the depth. Normally we taught the fish, but this is a lily pad that I'm going to add on at some point. I've already, yes.
Doug says a great example of where you can almost create by
cutting in and out.
rounding material, and then make your curving a lot more finished product rather than just removing with the Forstner bit and gouges. This would be a nice combination, getting down to almost a blank for the fish.
I'd say take up with the CNC, clean that up with first.
Oh, I've thought of that, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you could indeed do it with a CNC. You could even create some of the curves on the fish.
Yeah.
And you could take out things like on this side of the fish, I've already cut the fins down to where they should be, the height that they should be, which is about 1/3 the height of the whole thing. So yes, you could cut out those, and you could cut this all out. You might even be able to do a rough blank for the tail. That would actually be a nice way to compact a little, to make a class more compact.
Exactly, yeah. I think Doug is brilliant.
Brilliant.
They have the combination, yeah.
Yeah, we should work on that. Yeah. Okay, so because Dallas is having to stand here and do this, I'm not going to demo for much, but I'm just going to show you how you set it out, and then a little bit of creating the curve of the fish here. But once I've drawn out the map here, what we do is you go around with the veiner. You remember that one with the round bottom blade? And you go around about a 1/4 inch or a 1/2 inch from your line, and you create a little groove there, and then you work into that groove in removing the background. After you've got close, you then do the cutting in. And this is where it's nice to have a range of different blade curves. Because, for example, I can go in here. I'm normally barehanded, so I will work that way. I say to myself many times a day, keep the flesh behind the blade. As long as your flesh is not in front of the blade, it can't get cut. So here, I'm cutting that curve in there. You notice I'm doing it by hand without a mallet. And then I need something with the outside curve. Now this is not perfect, but that's fine for me. And again, just like with all other woodwork, we're creeping up on the line. One thing about carving is that if you didn't understand grain, you will get to understand grain. Because as you carve down like this, the grain is nice. It's running back and forth. As you carve down into it in different angles and different curves, the grain changes. So what might be a nice smooth cut here, a 1/2 inch down might be a different cut completely. So anyway, work away at this. You can see you could even use a flat chisel on the convex surfaces. That's a little too heavy a cut. The key is to thin slices. Lots of quick, thin slices. All right, now I've got a different shape there. So I need something like a number 7. And even before I start, I may set that in. And I'm certainly going to use my V tool, wherever that is, to, for example, when I start cutting out this fin here, I want to be sure that I don't pull out wood from here, right, from the fish itself. So I'll use my V tool at a slight angle there. Initially, I just create a line through there. You see, I can fairly rapidly separate. Do you see there where that wood's coming up? That's because I didn't have my blade out of the wood. The moment I sunk underneath the wood, that started to come up. So that's something you got to watch for. Yeah, because you're not cutting anymore, you're just splitting the wood. So I can use this to set up a vertical or a curved or whatever. But now I can start. Now, once I've completed this, which I'm not going to, but you can see that once I've got the right curve, and it's easy to find the curve, you just compare it to the pencil line. Again, you don't have to use something that's perfect for the curve. If you're doing a concave, you could even use something that is a much steeper curve and just work away at it. So you just got to be a little more careful and make smaller cuts. You can always use a different tool. And then I'm going to start cutting this baby down. Now you see I'm against the grain there. Even though my blade wasn't underneath, I was against the grain there. So first cut tells me that what I really want to be doing to get a nice easy cut is to be coming from this angle. You see the way I'm sliding that blade to one side there? That's called the sliding cut. In woodwork, it's really useful as well, because if you have grain that might split out, by using the sliding cut, you change the angle of the blade and you change the cut. So if you have that problem where no angle that you approach it from seems to avoid digging up the grain, try the sliding cut. And you can even kind of work it in like that. When I first started all woodwork, I had a real hard time with concepts that were out of square. So I always thought that a plane had to go dead straight down the middle of the piece of wood, didn't have to be angled. And the same with blades. I thought you had to just line it up with your grain right and do that. But there's all sorts of tricks, and this is one of the big carver's tricks. But you can, I don't know if you can see, but the back of the blade there, you notice, it's got a little fault there. There's a ding here. These stripes are because I need to sharpen that. So I'm going to actually have to take that to a stone. But unless I'm actually doing finish, doesn't really matter. Okay, where's my, I'm looking for my hone.
Oh.
There we go. So I'm just going to very quickly hone that. And this is how I get the back of these relatively low relatively low high circumference blades. That cuts a lot cleaner. Here's another tip for carving. If in doubt, go across the grain. Go across the grain. With going with the grain, you're either going with it and it might change, or you're going against it, in which case everything's just going to rip up. But if you, especially when you're taking material away, because let's face it, it's only the finish that matters. Up to that point, as long as you don't take that wood that you don't want to take out, everything else is you know, all fair in love and war. Use a chainsaw if you have to. But
Well, don't forget they wanted to ask about the hold fast.
the hold fast. Oh yeah, right. Okay, well, would you remind me that? I'm just going to show you something that we do, and then I'm going to stop the demo. But I'm just going to show you something that we do in carving that you don't do in a lot of other woodwork, with a lot of other woodwork tools. We put a back bevel, very small back bevel, on the tool. And what that enables us to do is to use the back side of the tool as a tool as well. So I'm going across grain here, but I want to start creating the curve of this fish, right? This is the spine, so this is my high point. So I'm just going to start, I'm going across grain. If I cut too deep, and sometimes I want to turn it round. See how rough that's cutting there? So that tells me that my good cut, that you see that didn't cut right. My initial cut was the good cut. But what I'll do, yes?
Could you tilt the camera down, please, so we could see?
Oh, he says, could you tilt the camera down?
Oh,
Oh,
There we
thank
go.
you. Thank you.
Yeah. So what I'll do is I'll just take a little bit off at a time. If necessary, I'll create a stop cut here. If, for example, I'm finding the grain changes in its attitude to my blade right here, then if rather than going around the other side of the piece, I'll keep working this side and then I'll go to that side. And what I do is I just put a stop cut in there, just something that will give me a logical end to where my blade is running. And again, I'm trying to do this quickly, which is never a smart thing to do when you're carving. But once I achieve the curve I want to achieve at one spot, then I can work everything to that. So it's like connecting the dots. So I'll shoot for getting that connection from there to down here, about a quarter inch off the bottom, because after you're done with carving it, you undercut. That is, you make a little undercut there, which gives you a shadow and gives you a more three-dimensional feel. So you can see using the back of the blade here. There's a lovely sound. When your blade's cutting nicely, it just has that. I find that taking small pieces, thin cuts, is much more effective. If I try to go too thick like I did just then, it might dig in. So I just take a little slice at a time. You see I'm creating that curve there? And all a curve is, as you CNC people know, all of you tech guys know that when you create a curve in a digital form, it isn't actually a curve, it's millions and millions of facets, or hundreds and thousands of facets. And this is much the same way until we start to use techniques that will actually smooth up the finish here. But when I'm done with this, I'm going to cut scales into it, which is another story. But you just keep working it. Once you have that curve, then you can start working back from that curve. And that way you're never working in the dark again. You're always working back from a point where you have the shape.
perfect.
And I find that that's really helpful. Okay, let's talk about holding these things down. Especially if you're carving on a plank of wood. Or for that matter, if you're just using, you're just trying to plane something at home and it's too big to hold in any of the jigs that you have, one of the really useful pieces is the holdfast, because it's very quick. With a clamp, first of all, you've got to be close enough to the edge of what you're clamping to in order to hold your piece. And so you can only really work it at the edge of your bench. And then secondly, you've got to undo the clamp, move it, do it up again. With the holdfast, this is not perfect. I'll often use just a piece of wood sticking up out of a hole to give me some additional support. But this is pretty firm, and yet I can release it like that. Now I can pick it up, get the crap off, turn it around, always put a piece of wood there, whack it back down, and it's just as firm. Second whack will make it even firmer. But so you can use clamps. You use whatever you have to. When obviously when you're working with something like this, and you've already carved the bottom and you're trying to carve the top, you don't want to put screws or anything like that. But that's another technique that's often used, is to screw your piece before you carve it into something like that piece of wood over there, you know, the duck sitting on, and then screw that into the bottom of the piece on the basis that the bottom side is not seen, or maybe it's a figure and it's just the base. In this case, we want the bottom to be seen. So what I did was I used that piece of wood that I cut it out on the bandsaw with, and so it was already in that shape, and I just used hot glue to glue this on, because all I got to do is, you may flinch at this, stick it in the microwave for 30 seconds, and it releases the hot glue. So that's another way to hold things that you're going to carve. If you are carving though, and you freshly clamp something, check the clamping, because it's, well, I'm sure some of you saw the wound or saw the effects of the wound that I had using this guy. I hadn't tightened this up, so it was halfway tight, so it felt firm. But I took a tool. It was this very tool. Got the blood stains off, and I was carving, and it basically went like that. And that's all she wrote. So be careful about clamping. This thing, I have to get down in here every now and again and tighten it back up because it works loose. But if I keep it tight, it works really well. But another nice thing about using your body and your hands is, if I'm working real close to a piece like this, my tool can't fly too far, and neither can the piece, and I'm kind of behind it, so I've got a hand on it. The only trouble with that is my hands leave black marks on the thing, so I have to clean it up using an eraser and alcohol and all kinds of stuff at the end. But do be careful about the clamping. And also, when you're working something like this, remember that should your blade go flying through and hit that holdfast, you've got an hour's work. So if you're willing to do it. So you want to be thinking about the clamping. There is another tool you can make, and I think I have a plan for it. It's basically a piece of plywood with some borders. This is one of the borders. This is one of the. I just put a bunch of screw holes in it, and it's essentially a piece of plywood with borders like this, and then pieces like this in between that I will screw down to hold the board in place. Yeah. And then I can clamp that rather than my board, which means I don't have to worry about putting a caul in here. But I'm not that experienced a carver, so if anyone else knows of other good carving clamps and vices and ideas, I'd love to hear them.
Well, I know we've got a bunch of guys in that SIG that do some great work too.
In the what?
In the carving group, the SIG.
Yes, which, thank you for reminding me. I tried to contact Chuck, but the phone number I have for him is dead. So I emailed him, didn't hear from him.
I got his number.
Yeah, there's a gentleman called Chuck Meacham has a carving group on, is it the
Second and fourth now.
second and fourth Tuesdays of the month. Chuck is actually a former president of the association from many years back. He's a very, very talented carver, and he has always got the time and the energy to teach people who want to learn it. So if you show up to his group, he'll, even without any tools, he'll be able to get you going on some kind of project that same day.
Now, the schedule on that, I should note, there's none on the calendar right now. We've had to change the schedule around because of COVID, and so we're trying to work out a time that works best for the other carvers. So right now, there's none on the calendar, and we'll be working with Chuck to get some on the calendar again and get them back to a regular schedule.
All right. Okay, well, I'll tie up by saying that these days, I'm going to finish up this fish and so on, and I really enjoyed the Palomar class because it kept me doing new carving challenges. But I'm beginning to start to carve into my furniture, and that is something that if you don't want to carve 3D and so on, if you actually start carving your furniture, and you don't need fancy equipment for that. But once you get the concepts of carving, you can add so much to your furniture. I made a piece a couple of years ago. Yes? Huh?
Are you deliberately carving into your furniture, or are you slipping a lot?
Deliberately talking with what?
Are you deliberately carving into your furniture, or are you slipping off your work?
Well, you would be. I am always surprised at how many mistakes and slips like that end up being something better. I had that something recently where I wanted to put a very small edge on something. I slipped and made a bigger edge, and it looked better. But yeah, it can certainly go that way. But it doesn't have to be obvious that you've carved it. But what you can do is you can do curves that aren't parts of a circle. You can do curves that change in their attitude, and you can add little shadows and stuff to your furniture. One of my favorite things that I did was I made a piece for my wife that's a music cabinet, and it has the panels of the cabinet are pierced carvings. They're fairly simple looking, but they were fun, interesting to do. But it just makes the piece.
Hey, Paul, just as a suggestion, because we've occasionally talked about once we can get back together again, having projects that we can do, this notion of creating a carving blank with the CNC might really make it possible over the course of 3 hours to use a variety of gouges, learn how to get the basics of carving done without having to clear away all the excess material. So someone comes in, they start with a crude blank that we've just CNC milled, and then over the course of 3 hours, we're introduced to the individual gouges. We actually work on our piece, and we walk away with the finished product. That seems to me like it would be a very gratifying first carving experience for people. And again, once we have an opportunity to get together again, that might be a good, fun thing to pursue, is a simple class that really delivers results. Again, marrying CNC to make blanks, but just enough of the blank so that you can then start applying the carving tools to it and get some results quickly.
I'm with you.
Okay.
I'm with you. That sounds like a great idea. I think yeah, because there's no question about it. Carving takes a lot of time. So something like that can save a lot of time and save a person from getting bogged down in the weeds, as it were.
Paul?
Yes.
Have you ever glued up blanks that, different types of wood or whatever to get a pyramid, if you will, of things before you start carving, instead of removing all kinds of wood, just gluing up blanks that are a good blank that kind of closely mimics what the eventual item is.
Absolutely, yes. I haven't done that a lot, but that's a really good way to approach it, and a way to reduce the waste of your wood as well. And yeah, I have a triangular piece of olive wood that's about 6 inches thick at the moment, and I'm going to do exactly that. Not different colors, but I'm going to take it and cut it in half, flip it over, glue those two pieces together. And then I want to basically carve something that's close to a spear, and then do a sculpture from there. But it's my first sort of attempt at sculpture.
Oh, very good, thanks.
But yeah, no, I've seen people do carvings where they've done several contrasting woods that they've glued together as well, and that can be quite interesting.
Hey, Paul, real quick, honing your chisel, do you only use a pull stroke, or can you use a push stroke too?
Well, honing, if you use a push stroke into leather, it just tends to cut the leather up a bit like it would wood.
Okay.
So yes, I always like to take the blade towards me, and or if you like, you know, keep the edge away from me.
Okay. Thank
now,
you.
when you are honing, the angle is not so critical, but using a hone is a great way to get the muscle memory for the angles. But when you're using a hone, because there's a little give in the leather, you can actually, you don't have to get the angle perfect. But it's best to get used to working at the same angle all the time, because that way you don't create a curve. But that's literally, keeping it sharp is just a matter of a few strokes.
Well, have you ever tried balsa in lieu of leather for honing?
No, I haven't. Wood will do it.
Yeah, balsa wood. I've heard that works as well.
Interesting. Well, if I ever find a piece, I'll practice with it. I know it's amazing wood.
I'm a sandpaper sharpener kind of guy, and I found balsa because I'd ruined my leather. It got wet and hard, but I had a piece of balsa from a model airplane that my grandson had, and I smeared the compound on it, and it seemed to work very well.
I think just like with the leather, as long as you're pulling your blade away from, you're not pushing it in, then I don't see why it wouldn't. Especially now, I'm going to try it. All righty. Any other questions? Then I think we'll pretty much wrap it up. Do you have any announcements to make?
No, I think we're set.
Like that? I'm hoping to set up these guest speakers in the next few days. So I'll, as soon as I get that, I'll put something out to our administrators and to the and on the forum.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.